All right, welcome to the world of innovative potential. I'm your host, Jordache. Today we're talking about stuff. Stuff is a long time coming. Stuff is a good one that I wanted to do. Stuff is something that I've always wanted to talk about. It's been like a decade of stuff that I wanted to talk about here. And tonight we're finally going to do it. We're going to talk about stuff. Like our 3-year COVID hiatus is already over with. But this stuff, the stuff brought to you by stuff. The stuff that we're stuffing about is the stuff that we're talking about. It's all physics. It's all physics. It's all like the universe. What the world of innovative potential is made up out of. Made out of stuff. Just like it's stuff. Not even. It's just pure stuff. Pure stuff. The world of innovative potential is made up of stuff. And I'm your host, Jordache. Welcome to it. Hey, how you going? How you doing? How's it going? We got stuff. Copyright, whenever. Copyright last week. Made up a bunch of stuff. We're talk about it. Table of contents. What we're talking about tonight is we're going to talk about stuff. We're going to talk about atom stuff. We're going to talk about the solar system. We're going to talk about the cosmos. We're going to talk about the universe. And then we're going to talk about more about stuff. Because stuff is stuff. So basically, stuff overview. Everything is made from stuff. All stuff belongs to a system, and sometimes the stuff changes systems. Like there. Charge. All stuff has a charge. This is kind of like whatever. It's still charge. Charges are either negative or positive. Negative and positive are just names given to opposite observational perspectives. So if you're looking at someone and someone's looking at someone, but you're both looking at the same thing, that's kind of the same thing, but the thing's looking back at you. That's the same thing we're talking about here. Positive is a name for an observation of system loss, and negative is an observation of system gain. So basically what this little diagram is showing, if you lose energy or something like that, it's positive. It's a negative from the object, but it's a positive to the system. So you got to really kind of watch this convention a little bit to know what you're talking about, because you can get lost, because when it's negative, the object gains something, but the system loses something. So these are more from a system perspective. So just watch what you're talking about when you're calculating stuff or doing whatever, but that's sort of it. Energy's out, gravity's in. It's just like you're making up names for stuff for a direction of motion.
Makes me want to move. Makes me want to jump around.
And you crap in the toilet, and you flush it down. It gains gravity and loses energy. It's as easy as that. Anyway, direction. All stuff has direction. There are 3 directions, X, Y, and Z. And the stuff can move in those directions. There's also negative X, negative Y, and negative Z. Not to be confused with charge or anything like that. It's just denoting, is it coming into the screen or is it going out of the screen? If you know how to 3D model, this is already it's gonna get fun for you. Anyway, and then temperature. All stuff has temperature. Temperature is a measurement of movement of stuff. So what I'm talking about here with temperature is that it's an intrinsic temperature. It's like, depending on what kind of level you're at, and I'll get into this later, but stuff has an intrinsic temperature. And it's like an object itself, if you heat up a cup, if you heat up a glass of water in the microwave, it gets more energy. If you cool it off, it gets less energy. But if you leave it at room temperature, it's just at room temperature. Same thing happens for subatomic particles and galaxies and stuff like that. It's just like a measurement of energy, but it always gets defined as temperature. So when you put all 3 together, all stuff has charge, temperature, and direction at the same time. So it's all 3 at the same time, and everything happens always. And it's not really confusing. It's just you get to the point where you don't even want to measure this type of stuff anymore. It's just boring. So that's what it means. You just don't care. But this is what it looks like when it's all sort of strapped together. And each one of the directions has their own negative and positive, and it's just Congratulations, welcome to particle physics. So here's our stuff overview. You might remember this from the Wheel of Energy talk. There's been some changes in the cosmos and on some of the names and stuff, but it's still basically the same idea. I love this stuff. This is the stuff that's like I can zoom in and I can zoom out. And this is the part that's like you just can't get lost for like a month at a time in this world of innovative potential. So we have parameters of charge, temperature, and direction, and that makes 6 points of data that you'll get, negative and positive, temperature and Kelvin. It's sort of an absolute. You either have temperature or you don't. And if you don't have temperature, you don't exist. That's basically what it is. If you can't get a temperature on it, if you can't get like a type of temperature reading on something, it doesn't exist. So absolute zero is like you don't exist. You go below absolute zero, you don't. It's like the threshold of existence. You just fall. You stop being existent. You just fall apart. That's sort of the idea there. So we're going to go through the whole wheel. So we're going to go through the atom section. We're going to start at the top, just slightly off center. We're going to start at 11, and we're going to start at 11 o'clock. And then 11:30, we're going to start at 11:30, and we're going to work our way around counterclockwise. And you kind of see that it builds up different structures, and I'll give a little talk about each of them. And this is a consolidation talk about just sort of going through, like, go Wikipedia these things. I've changed some of the names here because it makes, when you memorize the picture, it makes the picture make sense and more sense. And that's kind of it. So we're going to keep going through there. Anyway, geometry. The universe is foundationally geometric. All information in the universe is based on three basic 2D geometric shapes. There's the particle, there's the line, and there's the triangle. All information in the universe is geometric, and geometry is understood with mathematics. So all that stuff you learn in grade 9, grade 10, and grade 11 on how to do vector analysis and how to do like X and Y graphs and all that other crap. It's all done with a computer now in like 30 minutes. It's just what you learn in school is how to build the programs that you play with at home, and this is sort of what you're doing. Put a circle and then connect two circles. But basically, you don't get. Okay, so every system I'm talking about today follows this particle, line, triangle, assembly type of thing, and you don't get any more complicated triangles. You can make other shapes with two lines together, but two triangles together is sort of like the most complicated type of base unit shape you can possibly make. No, that's it. Period. Full stop. So anyway, matter. So from geometry, and then there's matter. Matter is the medium of geometry. The universe has 16 elementary particles, and that's the standard model. I don't really get into it because there's a lot of ground to cover. But go Wikipedia the standard model, and you'll see stuff. So matter in the universe is made of 3 types of particles: atomons, bosons, and leptons. These are quarks, these atomon things. I changed the naming convention because it now goes with bosons, leptons, electrons, neutrons, protons. What the fuck is a quark? So they're called atomons now, like atoms, but atomons because they're smaller, like bosons and leptons, electrons and neutrons. Quarks is a stupid name. It was always a stupid name. And you can fuck yourself. You disagree. Anyway, atoms. Atoms are made from particles of matter. Atoms are made from 2 types of atomons, 1 type of boson, and 1 type of lepton. So basically what we're doing is we're taking small geometric units and points and sticking them together. Sort of like you would do in Fusion 360 or Blender or Unreal Engine. You just take a circle and you start connecting, you do a triangle sketch, and you put stuff at the corners, and you try and build these atomic and subatomic shapes. So what's really important for what we do next in sort of the world of stuff is a baryon is a particle containing 3 atomons and multiple bosons. Atoms are made from 2 types of baryons. So the 2 baryons that make up most of the atoms in the real world are a neutron and a proton, and it's made of a up atomon and 2 down atomons, and 1 up atomon and then 2 up, 1 down atomon and 2 up atomons. And this is important to realize because they do something and the neutron will decay into the proton with this. It doesn't have a very strong shelf life. It doesn't have a very long shelf life. And it, like all of these things sort of, basically the neutron cools off and becomes a proton. And proton is the one that's most sort of like, stable at room temperature, I guess. Anyway, molecules. Molecules are made from atoms. So this is where it gets, now this is sort of like it's one of the nomenclature changes, but this is more a little bit more standard about stuff. Molecules are made from atoms. Atoms are connected together with electrons, and it takes 2 electrons to connect 2 atoms together. And I'm using helium-4. 2 helium-4s connected with 2 electrons here in the pink. And that's kind of how, that's what they look like. You just sort of kind of keep going from there. If you've taken your chemistry classes, if you've done anything like that, you'll start to, you won't, the problem is you don't see how the shapes all fit together in this like little magnet thing. You just end up with these like neutral and positive sticking together, and that's sort of it. But there's like this whole other magnet layer underneath it that nobody teaches you in grade 9. So you have to teach this like magnet layer that the ups and downs stick together in like opposite triangles, and they make like their own sort of like it's like and then they just stick together. Like not like a yin yang, but like magnets. Magnets is the easiest way to understand it. But the magnets have a shape, so it's like you just have to. So like in these examples, you gotta connect the red and green, and like they have to be opposite. So in this case, it's like the green and the blue go together, but you can have like 2 green to 1 blue. You just want to not really have like 2 green to 2 blue to, like you don't want to have like all these blue together without being connected to a green. You know what I mean? So it's like it's not that hard, but at the same time, you just gotta like pay attention and watch out for it. So. Anyway, those are molecules. So you can do whatever you want. You can make whatever types of atoms you want. The more protons and neutrons you put in, you just kind of keep adding, just keep stuffing that turkey kind of thing. And it's like, well, you get more electrons, you get more neutrons, and all get stuck together. And then you end up with like carbon, and you end up with like oxygen and stuff. So that's just sort of how that works. And it builds up again. And then you have structures. Structures are made from multiple atoms. So this is where it's like, it's that 1, 2, 3 kind of principle here. So atoms and particles, molecules and lines and structures and triangles. It's saying that you make stuff from lots of more complicated stuff. And it's like, if you want to put you take 1 atom and you put 2 molecules together and you make like a structure. So it's more of getting the idea in your head that you're going to be making these like bigger, more complicated shapes with small, simple building blocks. So this is where like your Legos comes in a little bit more readily. You get like, you get different shapes of Lego blocks, and you can stick them together in any color you want. You can stick them together in any shape you want, and any variable. Like you can do the 4 blocks, you can do the long 4 blocks, you can do the single blocks with the 4 blocks, you can do the 6 blocks with that huge big like green matte block thing. So those are the structures, right? But then structures can have any number of dimensions and are not limited by like molecule size, shape, or number. So this is where it kind of gets like, well, what the fuck are you talking about? It's like, so you have like one dimension is one dot, that's it. You can have your two-dimension molecule, which is like gases. Now you can have like a crystal forming kind of thing in 3 dimensions. But then when you get up to these 4 and 5D kind of things, like you have like self-propagating shapes, or shapes that are going to modify other shapes to propagate itself, right? And these are like, this is kind of when you get into like the 4D stuff. It's like, okay, well now you're in a crystal lattice, and you might have a doped crystal lattice, which means it's like it's not the same crystal lattice. It's not like a pure diamond. There might be like an imperfection or something missing in the diamond. So it's like, that's the shape, and the shape will still like propagate. So it's like if you heat it up or cool it off, it'll still come back to that same shape. That the shape itself is important is kind of what I'm saying here. And then in like 5D type of stuff, the shape is important, but the process that the shape is allowing to happen is also important. And that's the super important part. So the 5D world, and so it's like a 5D structure is a porphyrin. This is a porphyrin. This is, I think it's, if not porphyrin, then like one of the photosynthetic molecules. But it's a porphyrin nonetheless. But the porphyrin shape has a process. It does something. That shape captures, either light or oxygen, depending on what's in the middle. This is iron, so it's going to capture water and oxygen, split water in half, and split oxygen in half and make water, and then do something to something else. So it's a preservation of a process. So it's actually a shape made up of atoms that represent a process. So like an enzyme is a structure, right? Okay. So that's the part where it kind of like builds up. So you got to wrap your head around this 5D. It's like 5D is the process. So it's like 1, 2, and 3D. It's like 1 is the point, 2 is the line, 3 is the shape, 4 is like the inside of the shape, and then 5 is what the shape is doing. So it's like, it's kind of hard because you don't really think of like your building blocks being able to do something, but if you put the building blocks in water, and they can grow in size, but then they can, change the water or something. That's another thing there. So life is made up of, so then it's like, so the next thing on the wheel is life. So you go from structures make up life. Life is made from structures. And life is a set of, how do I want to say that one? Say it this way, right? And it's like, people say like, oh, what is life? No, none of that philosophical shit. It's like, it's straight up like structure and function in this world. Let's recap, because that was like huge. That's a lot of stuff. That in itself is stuff. You're like saturated stuff already, and that stuff in the world of innovative potential. Let's cool off for a second and come back. And now we're at life is made of structures. So life is a set of self-confined and self-propagating structures called environments. And this is more thinking about a structure that has So it's like, here's a structure, here's another structure, and they've created something inside of the structure that is different from the outside of the structure. So it can propagate. So I'm at cell level with this. So you can have an internal differentiation from just the energy around you kind of thing. So life is not limited to the number of structures, confinements, propagations, or environments within itself. And it kind of builds, and the size and scale progression that I'm building up to here is kind of following with these definitions: a virus, an organelle, a cell, an organism, like relations, family relations, clans and tribes, societies, and even technology itself are considered like life, are considered to be alive in some way, shape, or form. So the virus is alive in the sense that the DNA has been protected from the outside by a physical structure, but the DNA itself is now able to replicate itself and the process of replicating itself, given the right conditions, to propagate itself even more. And same thing for an organelle. So this is like where mitochondria come from. You have DNA with a double membrane with a set of proteins that, you know, there's an acidic hydrogen pump basically functioning within it, and it is separate from the rest of the environment. And you're looking at this in a really long unit, like solve the universe's problems kind of level. Like where did like people and cells come from? It's like, well, they came from viruses and organelles, and then they all got encapsulated in the same sort of system. And that goes for people. So people build, like, then there's like the people, or like organisms, or like dinosaurs, or trilobites, or like, you know, just things that you would consider to be like a creature or a life on another planet. It's going to follow this type of structure. And then relations, so there's like, you know, you could have social networks, you could have like tribes, you could have like cavemen type of stuff, you can have like whole herds of dinosaurs. It's like like recognizes like, and then those groups and herds and tribes and stuff, they form societies, and then the societies form technologies. And the societies, so it's like each one of these, according to these definitions, like they're self-confined, but they're also self-propagating. And they're all like they are their own environments for propagating themselves, and they create their own environments for propagating themselves. So same with society, same with, and even like the cool part is like when you kind of like really start like spacing out and thinking about this with like technology and stuff, it's like, yeah, some technology creates environments for which the technology can itself thrive and flourish, or it finds environments in which it can thrive and flourish. That's why it's kind of sort of around here. That was a new one that came out, the technology came out about because of the joining, because it's like, well, it's a technology, and where is it applied to? Well, it goes to these types of environments. So it also makes those types, when it's in those types of environments, it allows other people to learn about it, it builds a society around it, and it's like it encapsulates itself in its own thing. That was the cool part. So that's a lot. Give it a second here. Cool it off. Stuff. We're talking about stuff tonight. Switch back. Back to the main. Spheres. So spheres are interfaces between life and the planet. Spheres can create and influence other types of spheres, such as the biosphere, the hydrosphere, the atmosphere. Things you've heard about before, but some things you might not have heard about before are like the cryosphere, so like the ice, stuff that has to do with ice. And the pedosphere, stuff that has to do with soil and dirt and you know, think about like a pedal where your feet goes. That's kind of the Greek root word there, where your feet goes, where your foot goes. So there's a lot of pedal words with the pedosphere. Lithosphere, I was gonna go with lithosphere, but this is more about how these different things can interact. So if you want to go like a Gaia philosophy, this is where it's at. So it's like these different spheres of the planet, these different environments interact with each other interexchangeably. So it's like if you have like, well, how does the biosphere interact with the atmosphere? It's like, well, rainforests soak up lots of water from the ground and store it, but they also create their own little microenvironment which traps that that metabolic evaporate from all those trees and animals, and it creates its own like water cycle within the rainforest, right? Same thing. So that then there's also the stuff that lives below ground. The pedosphere is kind of like it's a biosphere, but it's also its own, like it's a little bit more. It's how life interacts with rocks, basically. That's how I put that one. And this is sort of, now you're thinking at the planetary scale here. So it's still pretty huge, and it's just like, you want to go like atmospheric chemistry, and it's like, well, here's our oceans and they're acidifying. How does like a gigantic algal bloom affect the pH and rainfall of, you know, an area the size of 4 times the size of Texas out in the Pacific? How does that work? Like how do algae affect El Nino? That's kind of where the spheres are interacting here, and they get like, you know, and it's measurable. It's all observable. It's measurable. There's whole like wings of the universities devoted to it. So those are the spheres, and then when you zoom out even further, you got the rocky bodies. So the rocky bodies are any small, dense objects in space. So rocky bodies are classified based on their size and orbital behaviors. So you have asteroids, comets, meteoroids, planetoids, and moons. The moon being the orange one and the blue-green the planet. Comets are sort of asteroids that orbit the sun but on a different type of loop. They come in and burn up and then go away. Meteoroids, planets, basically they're all sort of like the way rocky bodies are kind of defined is that they're not tectonically active. They may or may not have an atmosphere, they may or may not have something on it, but if they're not tectonically active, they're a small body because there's physically not large enough to support that type of convective gyre inside of them. So Mercury, even though it's a planet, is still like a rocky body. Pluto and the OORT cloud, it's all rocky bodies. The asteroid belt, all rocky bodies. A lot of the moons, Jupiter, rocky bodies. Just make your life easier. Here are 5 types of rocky bodies, and what they're classified as is what they're going to do. That's how we're categorizing stuff in the world of innovative potential. Okay, tonight we're talking about stuff by innovative potential. It's what makes the world of innovative potential exist. You're just joining us, we're at planets now. So planets are any bodies in space that are chemically active. So what this kind of means is that the planet itself, so if there was no atmosphere, if the object itself was just left alone by itself, it's able to make chemical changes on its own. It doesn't need, so it's basically some type of tectonically active body. So planets are classified on a gradient based on their size, chemical activity type, and what they are made of. I'm kind of going with a blue to green safety zone here. So blue is something that human life can inhabit. Red is don't even bother. Like you will not be living on a subnuclear giant. But basically, the planet is tectonic, and the planet itself has been able to generate organic molecules and organic habitats. So if you get to those science fiction garden worlds, that's a blue planet. There's sort of tectonic inorganic. So it's like something like maybe Venus. It's tectonically active, so it's able to do something that's chemically active. It's able to have a chemical regeneration cycle. It's able to create it's able to create new chemicals, modify those chemicals, and then sort of like redistribute and resubsume those chemicals over the geologic time periods. But they're not organically active chemicals. They're not something that we can use. So there's no biosphere. There might be something like small, there might be methane or small molecules or something like that, but they're not like 3 carbons or larger. And there's not a lot of it. So it's like there kind of won't be life. And if there is life, it's not going to be anywhere near us. Not even close. Then there's non-tectonic organics. So it's like these planets might be like really close to a moon or something. In that the moon and the planet itself is sort of acting as its own chemical generator. The moon is turning the atmosphere of the other planet rather than the planet acting as a standalone. And that's kind of like well, we can caution it, we can maybe look at it if we want to go to that planet or something. But the point is, it's got organic stuff on it. So we might be able to send some bacteria there to colonize it for us. Or we might be able to send some plants there to colonize it for us. And then we can come back later and harvest it or something like that. But we wouldn't be living there. We might be able to use it or set up shop, but we're not like, it's not an Earth planet. It's not a blue ball. And then there's non-tectonic inorganic. So something like Mars, I think it's not really tectonic, but it's not really organic either. So that's sort of like, it might just be a dust ball with an atmosphere. So those are so it's like, well, what's really there? You have to go there. If you set up shop there, you then have to set up an atmosphere for yourself, or you have to really sort of like, it's not worth it. And then you get into these subnuclear giants. So basically what's happening here is something like Jupiter and Neptune. They're still giants, but they're not nuclearly active, and they're able to have some type of chemical convection system where they can like drop into this core in the atmosphere, do a couple of modifications, and then send it back up to the upper atmosphere, all the while just having this like gigantic ball of energy flux. There's no surface, we're not going there. So that's basically the stuff of planets. And then the stuff of suns. So, and suns are any bodies in space that produce nuclear reactions. And that's the definition right there. Any body in space that produces nuclear reactions is a sun. Suns are classified based on their size and age. Low mass suns typically recycle themselves through an energy loss system. And then high mass suns become nova stars, which I'm doing a nomenclature change here for innovative potential, and or galaxies. So basically, anything that does a nuclear reaction is a sun. So Polaris is a sun. Arcturus is a sun. Betelgeuse is a sun. Because they all do nuclear reactions. You know? You didn't understand. So basically what I'm showing with this diagram is a sun like ours will eventually sort of like shed its outer layers, create a nebula, and then collapse back down on itself kind of thing. So it'll lose energy. Whereas some other stars will basically increase their gravity and implode on themselves and like start fusing, fusing atoms together and doing other doing other types of nuclear chemistry and burning different types of nucleus as fuel. So if you want to learn more, you can go Google Wikipedia. It gives you a really good sort of like definition. But there's like 100 different types of stars. There's mainline stars. There's super ultra mega giants. There's no size limit on these things. And now what I'm sort of proposing here for suns, we're not even there yet. So we are here. So going back to our little wheel, just because a lot of people just get lost in the world of stuff. It's heavy. The stuff gets heavy after a while. So we're over here at suns. So we've gone from geometry to suns. And just to remember that there's a charge, temperature, and direction for all the atoms, molecules, structures, lives, spheres and planets, just the matter kind of thing. That exists so far. So we've completed atoms. And now we're in the solar world of the universe of stuff. This is just stuff. Like saying stuff. We're going to switch over to stuff. Give ourselves a break because there's a lot of stuff here. Okay, so we're back and we're talking about stuff. We're at suns. We're in the solar system now. We're into the solar quadrant. We've gone through planets. We've gone through suns, stuff that does nuclear stuff. And we're going to talk about nebulae. And go all the way on here. There they are. So here's our suns. And if you zoom out even more and even further, there's just big, nebulae are enormous volumes of gas, ice, and dust in space. There's planets. There's a bunch of stuff inside of them. And nebula are responsible for the majority of sun, planet, and rocky body formation. Nebulae are categorized based on their density and or evidence of nova activity. So you can have like of exploded suns. So there's the regular sort of like beautiful cloud shape. And then there's a dark nebula, which has a lot of dust and gas in it, so you're not going to see it. And then there's just like the ones that were made directly from a star exploding. And that's how they're kind of classified right now. And this is the big change that I'm including in this stuff because it's too hard to categorize all of it and keep it all straight ahead. So a star is a black hole, and a star is any universal body that can do an atom-on reaction. So basically, if you can modify a proton as a heavenly body, you're a star. Okay, that's what it is. That's the definition. Becoming a star, you obviously do a lot of nuclear stuff. Becoming a star, you've gone through your sun phase, but you're a star now because you can actually make a modification to a proton and a neutron. You can smash two of them together and get 6 independent things out of it. So there are no size limits to stars, and stars are able to interact with truly massive amounts of matter. They're able to do a quark gluon. So if you want to use the old language, they're able to do a quark gluon plasma, and they kind of go on from there, and you just go on from there, and they just precipitate out heavier objects as you sort of move in proximity in this gigantic Marangoni gyre of convection and temperature. So there are no size limits to stars, and stars are able to interact with truly massive amounts of matter. Stars are responsible for the recycling of atomic elements through atom-ion reactions, and they can be small. They can be as small as just a singular sort of just a single star. They can be large. They can be galaxy class. So that's kind of how we're building up the nomenclature for this, with a couple of modifications, because nobody's really done it yet. So we're the first to do it. Welcome to Innovative Potential. Clusters. So even if you zoom out even further, what's bigger than a star? Clusters. Clusters are groups of stars. So clusters are super gigantic collections of nebulous suns, planets, and rocky bodies held together by multiple stars. So the I want to call it the Magellanic Cloud, but it's the Magellan Cloud. Magellanic Cloud, whatever. There's a couple of clouds that are outside of our galaxy that aren't actual galaxies. They're like mini galaxies or like micro galaxies. They're not full galaxies. They're not independent enough. They're clouds. That's where this is coming from. And then galaxies. So basically you take a cluster of stars, and when they get close enough together, they pull in everything and they gain a new type of structure. And that new type of structure is called a galaxy. We're a lot more familiar with this than, and the thing is, we're a lot more familiar with sort of the big milestones than we are with the intermediaries. And this our stuff is able to do the intermediaries, right? So galaxies are super large rotating clusters. They're a little bit more than that. They have superstars in their center. And galaxies are classified based on their shape. There are ellipticals, there are spirals, and there are barred spirals. So when you look this up, you're going to see like the Hubble classification system on Wikipedia kind of thing. And it's good enough because there's like 20 different, there are like 10 different elliptical class galaxies. So each one of these has their own, like you can, you spend like, go spend the Saturday stone, browsing Wikipedia kind of thing. And this little mini stuff guide is going to help you so much make sense of putting all of this shit together. How does it even fit together? This is how it fits together, I'm telling you. So after the galaxies, we have groups. So groups are formed. So where are we right now here? We're here. We're at the bottom. So we've gone through matter, molecules, life, rocky bodies, stars, galaxies. We're at just the galaxies, and we're coming up on groups. So let's come back to groups. So groups are formed from multiple galaxies. So you kind of get to see it's like, okay, well, it's still that same ball, stick, and triangle shape motif repeating over and over again. It's like, and there's nothing wrong with that because that's the lowest energy level. That's like the lowest energy of everything. A ball, a stick, and a triangle. Because it's like when you connect the dot for the stick and the ball, you end up with a triangle. So you're always looking for these extremely low energy super. Like I am just gonna be so lazy. I'm just going to build everything out of a ball, a stick, and then another ball and stick stuck together. And that's it. That's the entire universe. A ball and stick stuck together. Groups are formed from multiple... So groups. Groups are formed from multiple galaxies. Groups contain nebula and clusters, and groups are classified based on their galactic density. So you can have like a low density kind of thing, and you can have a high density kind of thing happening. Because this then leads into the new big structure that was this is not, now we're getting I think this was done in the 70s or 80s, these were discovered, maybe in the 90s. Filaments. Filaments are structures made from groups. Filaments are roughly linear regions of space with varying densities of groups, and there's matter in between groups and filaments. So you're going to see, so when you kind of look at these different like n-body simulations, when you kind of look at the base, like large scale structure of the universe, and we get to that. It's basically, here are the linkers in the strand, but they're all pulling everything together in a type of flow. So it's like, it's hard to describe because it's like blood. You're closer to looking at like blood in a blood vessel with the filaments in the star, because the galaxies are like the red blood cells, but there's also little platelets, there's also little proteins flowing along the filaments with the blood. So if you want to use that analogy, that's a good analogy. I like that analogy. I'm coming from biology on this one, and I use other biology references later on to sort of put this like thing together. Nodes. So when you zoom out, you have these groups and you have these things that are connected. So when you have a high density region connected to another high density region, you start getting actual structure. You're getting this dot line triangle motif repeated again in like this, like the super heaven cosmos kind of thing. But you're also getting at like at the quark level. You're getting at the atom, you're getting at the neutron level. Also, so it's just sort of like, how do you like, make those two, and how do you make that Ouroboros meet? So nodes connect filaments, and nodes are made when high density groups combine together. And nodes can be classified based on their density and branching connections. So you have low branching, low density, and low branching, high density, high branching, low density, and high branching, high density. And this is basically saying there's a mass function with this, that a high branching, high density node has more mass in it, and you can measure that. There's more going into that region than it is a low branching, low density region, which then brings us into plumes. So when you stick a whole bunch of these filaments and nodes together, you get this bird-like down feather. You get a down feather. So Google down right now. Open it up. Let's go find Google. We'll open it up. And I mean bird down, like an ostrich feather. When you look at structures like Laniakea, it looks like an ostrich feather. It looks like chicken down. It looks like bird, like a tuft of something. Now a lot of it's being described like celestially as this big, huge gravity thing, and there's this like empty void, and they're using a different language, but the language is stupid. Because the language is not relatable back to something knowable. And that's what the universe is doing. It's making these sort of like fractal repeats, because it's using the same 1, 2, 3, 6 unit design motif. And that's just like, any stoner will tell you, like, yeah, it's so fucking obvious. But unfortunately, they don't know how to describe it, or it's very poorly described, or it's just like, well, isn't this the physicist's job to describe it and to teach it a lot better? Yeah, it should be, but they're shit at it. So anyway, plumes are structured made from filaments and nodes. Plumes are named because they resemble bird down. Plumes can be branched. Laniakea is our plume. Plumes have an anatomy, and just like the bird feather, there's a rachis, or the shaft of the feather. There's a barb and a barbule on it, and at the center of the barb and the barbule, there is a node, and same with the rachis and the shaft. There's another node. So you can also have the two rachis stuck together. That's the only thing. But when you put a bunch of these plumes together, you get a fascicle, so like muscle. So when you're following along with this, and you open up, boot up your Bing, and you get to see a different type of picture-based explanation for what these structures are actually doing and actually talking about. So if you type in bird down, you get a structure and a shape and a pattern. So now, okay, you can really sort of just see what this guy is talking about, because this is a gravity-based shape. It's doing something, it's accumulating mass, but it's also accounting for negative and positive charge. It's also accounting for temperatures. It's also accounting for something else. To say that the universe is actually doing some self-regulating temperature control is not an understatement. It might sound strange, but it's pretty self-evident because, all the heat is kind of flowing in one direction. Stars are, a galaxy is hotter than a single star. A galaxy is hotter than a single sun. And these are like really big scale terms. So there is some kind of like temperature regulation going on. Only in the sense that cold stuff flows into hot and hot stuff flows into cold. And positive flows into, there is a flow. Anyway, the fascicles are formed from multiple plumes. Fascicle means a bundle of structures. It's like a muscle. So if you do a cross section of a muscle, you see the muscle. You see the muscle itself. You cut the muscle in half and pull out one of the little bundles. That's a fascicle. There's a reticulum that helps do it. But the whole idea here is you're starting to see these. So that you're able to see these universal patterns and taking shape, because what actually makes a muscle move is an ionic interaction. But it's important to keep this type of like charge, direction, and temperature type of thing in mind when you're trying to learn and trying to explain and understand these physical systems. So the fascicles are based on the plume density from low to high. So once again, you're trying to make the universe is accumulating mass to make these nodes, to make these particles for the next, tier or logarithm of the structure. So if you zoom out from these fascicles again, you get these nexuses. So these fascicles create a high density collection, and then we get another set of nodes. But the nodes are a nexus now because there's just so, it's like going from like 10 to a billion inside. It's like taking a grain of sand and turning it into the size of the moon. Or your mom. Anyway, nexuses are made from multiple high density fascicles. Nexuses are large nodal-like structures that make up the observable universe. Nexuses can be classified based on their matter density and number of branching connections. So just like the nodes, there's low branching, low density to high branching, high density, and the two intermixable combinations of the two. So when you start linking nexuses together, and we're down here now, we're in the cosmos. We're in the cosmos level. We've gone through galaxies, groups, filaments, nodes, plumes, fascicles, nexuses, reticulation. So these words, I've changed these words. You're gonna look at like superclusters. Yeah, a fascicle is a supercluster. But because you're only dealing with antiquated languages built up from the 1970s forwards, this is taking 2012 and 2023 and looking backwards and getting like, oh no, fuck you. This has a whole bunch of other anatomical and other natural structural components that's able to be observed in your daily life. Because they're all mediating the energy exchanges or the gains and losses of charge, temperature, and direction. So we're up at nexuses and reticulations, and the size scale is like it's truly like blowing your mind here because you're kind of having to relate. It blew my mind quite a few times. Just having to relate the geometry. Like once you figure out it's the 1, 2, 3 kind of thing, it's not anything more difficult than that. It gets easier because you're always going from like planets, suns, moons, planets, suns. Then you go to like stars, clusters, galaxies. Then you're going to like galaxies, groups, and filaments, or like it actually goes from groups, filaments, and nodes. Yeah, so the triplets are groups, filaments, and nodes, stars, clusters, galaxies, planets, suns, and nebulas, life, spheres, and rocky bodies, atoms, molecule structures. So there are sets of triplicates in this, and that's what makes it so much cleaner. It's not necessarily easier because there's a whole bunch of like, there's 15 different types of galaxies, sometimes up to like 35 different types of galaxies. There's about 8 to 10 different types of suns, nuclear burning, heavenly bodies. Like, so there's a lot of like microstructures within these, just like the wheel of cancer biology, just like the pharmaceutical development. So there's a ton of stuff associated with one of these, but when you want to get a handle on it, this is the place. This is the one-stop shopping. This is the place to go. This is the one-stop shopping, just to like make it make sense. This is the world of innovative potential, and it is dominated by stuff. Okay, I'm back. We're talking about stuff, but the world of innovative potential. But we're not done. Not even close. We still got a bunch of things. We are at reticulations. So reticulated. Okay, what does that mean? Reticulated. Reticulations are structured made by connecting nexuses. So it's a little bit connected dots here. It's like a geodesic dome. You know that thing, that bubble, that thing at the Epcot Center that's not at Disneyland or Disney World? It's like a golf ball, but it's made of like spikes instead of like cups on it. That's a reticulation. If you've ever seen like stomach or a tripe at the grocery store, it's a reticulation. It's just sort of like a web, but it's not like a web. It's more like, whoa, what's a reticulation in nature? Like a spider web is, trees are a type of reticulation. but they're more like a whole bunch of branches. The reticulation is like a little bit more flat. You know what I mean? So reticulations are the largest structures in the universe that we've observed and that we can observe up to this point. And reticulations are connected by stellar fibers. So what the hell is a stellar fiber? It's just sort of just like the filaments, just like the fascicles, then they have the stellar fibers. It's like these are huge amounts of stars going into the next set of nexuses. So there's nexuses, and then the next thing we're going to talk about, and basically what's feeding these massive, gigantic things, we're going to solve right now. So coalescences are the largest particles in the universe. They're the big dots. So when you go and see the N-body simulations, when you see the deep space imagery and stuff like that, this is what we're going to talk about in a minute here. So coalescences are the largest particles in the universe, and coalescences combine into white holes. So basically what this picture is showing is that the reticulation level is then superseded by these coalescences and connecting these coalescences together. And the coalescence are these gigantic nodes that sort of just like take their time and fuse together. And when the coalescences combine into a white hole, you get a big bang at that point. So in the world of innovative potential, in the world of our stuff, our universe can have multiple big bangs. So big bangs are made from a combination of multiple coalescences. Big bangs are able to displace huge sections of the reticulated structure of the universe, acting as a powerful reshaping and rejuvenating force. However, big bangs quickly collapse and remodel the reticulation structure and the coalescences locations. So what I'm trying to get at here is that you blow up a section of this thing, the force of the light and the force of neutrinos and everything else. It's sort of like how the nuclear reaction works when you get the blue carbuncle light coming out of it in the reactors. The medium of the reticulation and all the other matter actually slows down the speed of light. So you can have like other particles fly through, but by the time you sort of observe it, it's already cooled down enough to start dropping out and reforming the reticulation. And you get this by observing the N-bodies, the larger long-term N-body simulations. So where does that leave you about all of this other stuff? So it's basically you're sort of left in a universe where if you have to zoom out past this level, everything else is inferred because you can't physically observe past a certain point. So this is where we're at. This is the end of the universe. This is like as far as we can observe. Sort of here's how it can be created, destroyed, and remodeled. So it creates this massive sort of explosion pocket. And then before you see the light finish cooling off, it's already started collapsing in on itself and restructuring itself, just almost for the sake of being able to restructure itself. So the inferred universe is observed by inferring using a full set of previous observations. So you got a lot of previous observations to deal with here, from geometry all the way to the Big Bang itself, to be able to make a good conclusion on, what comes next or how far you can zoom out now. So the inferred universe is not directly observable. However, based on all of the other observations, that unobservable universe will have geometry, particles, shapes, structures, etc. that you'll have to deal with, and you'll have to find another particle when you zoom out even further. And you're still going to have to balance all of these, like, here the stuff has, and in their summary, it's like the stuff has charge, temperature, and direction. These big bangs have a charge, a temperature, and a direction associated with them as a complete phenomenon. You go start looking at particles, forget it, you're stupid. consider the Big Bang as an entire particle itself. So stuff sticks together, growing in size from atoms to solar systems to cosmic scales, and from cosmic scales to universal sizes. And the universe is foundationally geometric. So it's basically a gigantic matrix of triangles that just stick together in different shapes and rotations and stuff to make bigger and better structures. And that's it. That's the end. That's the end. That's the entire thing that everyone's observed until you can go smaller than mathematics and bigger than an inferred universe. Because basically, kind of what happens here is you don't really get into weird stuff, but you get this you make this connection between the mathematics of prediction and everything that's been observed. And that's kind of where you get into 3D modeling, and you get into video game manufacture, and you get into these Unreal 5 engines, and you get into these particle physics engines, and you get into these world simulators, because it's all inferred from everything you've observed. And if you can't observe anything different from the simulation, that's it. Congratulations. You've sort of maxed out everything. Hey! Our homework's done. So let's jump over quick and just show you some of the pictures that I was talking about, because it is going to get in a body. So it's going to be one of those things where it's just how does light work with this? How does these other things work with this? Just basically, okay, I guess switch this over here. I think that's how this works. So you're gonna be in full screen for this to be captured. If it can capture it at all, or if it has to be captured by the. Oh no, it's gotta be in I know what we're gonna do screen capture. Full screen. Full screen. Anyway, if you Google this stuff, you'll see that the particle physics and the simulators and the Unreal engines and the blenders and stuff like that of the world. I'm not gonna play with that. The n-body problem, if you look at them, what we're talking about here is that in a product chicken soup. And you get the idea of if you make your own chicken stock, you make your own soup, and you see all the little lipid micelles on the top, and you see the evaporation, and you see it at 80 degrees Celsius. It's not boiling, but it's hot enough to just see everything moving around on the surface. That's kind of what you're looking at, but it's going to be like that the whole way through. And that's sort of the difference. I'm gonna see if I can bring up a picture just to sort of not explain, but just show you, just outright show you it, because it's getting all of these things put together that really sort of, yes, there it is. So this, zoomed in. This is what I'm talking about when I'm saying words like reticulation and coalescence and stuff like that. So that big dot in the middle, That's a coalescence. It eats up all of these other smaller little nexuses. So these smaller, okay, so the big dot in the middle is a coalescence. The smaller dots around the outside, because they're not as big and as dense as the center one, but the density of the center one is like a million times more than the smaller big one. So this is where we're getting into words like nodes, reticulations, fascicles, bundles, stellar, things like that. And it's like they're just super massive. These are like universal and cosmos size. We don't get bigger than this because you're kind of at the speed of light. We can't see bigger than this. We can take our, fractive, iterative, nested, repeating geometries and apply it on top of all of this to make a whole new level of physics that's totally possible. But we're never really going to observe it. And that's the part that the rest of the universe is inferred. And by using mathematics and geometry, you can actually take that inferred universe, that virtual universe, and reapply it and overlap it to your currently existing real world. So it's like, where does imagination come from? And does this universe have one? And it's like, yes. That sounds weird, but this is where all of your virtual numbers and virtual particles come from. And that's something that it's a different talk in and of itself, but it's something that can be answered sort of right here, right now. Okay, so how did I put this together? It's kind of easy when you just take a second with it. So right here, this is our like baryon. This is our 1, 2, 3. So basically, you take a triangle. You take 3 circles. What I did. Oh, I opened the wrong one. That's right. I opened the wrong one. That's what I did. I put a triangle in it. So different. Open this one. So this is what I did. I took a triangle. I took an equal triangle. It's made from 1 dot and 1 line with 2 dots in it. So it's basically this. I took a dot. So I took a line from here to here, and I added a dot, and then I connected the 3 to sort of do this. And that's it. That's all it takes to make the universe is 1, 2, 3. And then I made some circles, because you get into this stuff. It's like, well, you have an X and a Y to every point on a triangle. So the triangle can move this way, that way, and all around. It always turns into a circular shape, just because it's a circular shape until you put a break on it, kind of thing. But this is the basic structure that I'm working with, and it's working out fine. So how does it work out when you sort of add it into a larger structure? So if this is a baryon, oh no, I don't know what it is. So if we go back to our little picture thing, our wheel of pictures, I'm talking in this sector right now. I'm talking about this sector, so we're talking about geometry and how geometry relates to matter and atoms and molecules and stuff. Basically, if you follow this geometry, you do get like some like new ideations and inferences and insights into actually how this thing is how this like big universe is working mechanically. We know a lot about life and how life works. We know about the structures. We know about spheres. We know a lot about this like left half or right half of the. We know everything in the sort of the orange and green. We know a lot about. It's in the blue and purples that we're kind of like only just observing now, and really seeing how the two of them like double overlap on top of each other. Just to sort of, it's like, as people, like within the last century, we discovered all of this, And now we're kind of going back and revisiting it all and saying like, okay, this is how this is. Like, is this how it actually works? And it's like, yeah, we're just reconfirming old stuff right now. Like really, like Grecian and Egyptian old stuff. So the point I want to get to is like, start off with a baryon and you make it. So you start off with this shape and you make it. And it's a baryon and it can fit the gluons and it can fit sort of what you need to do. But when you start 3D modeling it fits, but then you start getting into this type of situation where you have, let's open this up. So you kind of end up with this. So it's like you have a proton here, and then you have a neutron. The proton is this. I don't know if you can see it here. Zoom in. I made this in a 3D modeler. This isn't a thing, but it's a way to start thinking and getting students to think about stuff. That will help them make it make sense. So I don't know if you can kind of see it. There's one of these things here with that wire picture on top of it. So I kept that wire picture in frame, and then put in the 3D balls. We put the spheres in, the orbs, and we just sort of made it up like this. And we got the orbs made, and color coded them to be in the down down up and the up down down for the proton and neutron, like I talked about in the other slide. So basically, go back to stuff. Go back to our stuff slide. I'm at this level here. I'm at the atom level. But I'm at the molecule level now. So we're talking about the helium-4 here. So there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, up, up, down, and down, and up. Ups and downs. Remember that song, Ups and Down, by the Venga Boys? Basically that song. Up and Down by the Venga Boys here. That's what we're talking about. That's what this shape is. That's where the shape is coming from. But it's like, well, do they connect like, it's like the big question is, well, do they connect like this where you just, stick a whole bunch of like opposites attract magnet type of things to them and then let them do what they want? Or is there like something stronger here? So that's kind of what I got into a little bit. Just helping myself understand it. So basically, if you follow kind of where I'm going with this and what I'm talking about with it. There we go, this one. So this is sort of like answering the same kind of question. It's like, see how there's a different shape to this one. There's like two different shapes happening. And it's like, well, the whole point of this is to make the freebie. So what the hell does that mean? In the other pictures with the geometry, you can get multiple shapes. So you can wiggle these around top and bottom, left and right in the X, Y, and Z directions and get different shape configurations. So that's what we're kind of showing between this blue-green picture or what I'm showing between this blue-green picture and this black and white picture is that you can take these little shapes, these little geometry shapes, and rearrange them in different geometries to make the thing stronger. So this, if you start it with a 4 base, 1, 2, 3, 4, and just do it like that, you get a whole bunch of, you can get a cis and trans configuration, and it's not sexual here. This is like chemistry cis and trans, or either all on the same side or not all on the same side. So here's that 4. There they are. Okay, so here's the other picture. So this is the what is it? This is the trans configuration. No, yeah, this is the trans helium-4 nucleus configuration. So we take them. take the baryons and we just sort of rotate them. We took two baryons and we rotated them up at a 30-degree angle to say, well, if they're not all flat, they could be flipped up and down like this. So take the whole thing and rotate it in one direction. You still have the blacks and whites sort of connecting each other. You still have that positive negative. You still have the two different like things being able to associate and connect with each other. But you get one shape out of it, and then you get this other shape out of it. Where is it? You get there's also the cis configuration, which is more like a cup. Is this one? No, that's this one. So this is the one with the cup. So you can kind of see how we still have that black and white configuration happening. But now we have them being able to make this like a pyramid type of basket shape on it. It's like, well, is that the best shape that they're actually going to make, being as super lazy as nature is? And you got to be like, you have to be so super lazy about this stuff that it's almost like it's almost frustrating how lazy you actually have to be about this, because when you do it this way, you can't close it. It's not a circle. You have to be lazy, and you have to be like lazy and circular, anything beyond geometry, even if you're in geometry. So this picture here I found was the better configuration, because it's flat, but when you take this flat, instead of making it in 4, you keep it as 3, and you just sort of like, connect the color codes up. But then when you take that picture and color code it up, well, I'm going to show this one. You do diamonds. So basically, okay, we'll come back to that in a second. You get this shape. You can get list. There we go. So you get this 3D model of a helium core underneath this. That ends up with a virtual neutron in it. So if you take the pyramid, this triangle shape. So you take this triangle shape and you take the tips. If you put all the tips together, so that you fold them up like it's like this, and you fold them up like this, you get a free neutron out of it. Buy now and save. So this part, it's sort of like making, being able to have like a resonance structure for your isomers. So it's like there is a virtual baryon resonance structure within your helium nucleuses at innovative potential. Whether or not that's in the real world, I haven't really found anything about that. But just using some simple 3D modeling and a little bit of a wireframe and some geometry, I ended up with a project that can go to cyclotron. So that's sort of what where we're at with innovative engineering. But the cool part is you get this like 363 type of structure with this alignment that you don't get it with any of the other ones. You don't get a free virtual neutron with any other configuration of the helium-4 baryons. So what the fuck is that? It means basically, if I was to just take the here we go. So if I was to just stack the balls on top of each other, I actually can't make one of the free ones. That's what this picture is showing. I can't get this structure. There's this wireframe. The wireframe is just there to show what like the configuration is supposed to be. So it's sort of like the bond angles don't work in the stacked in the diamond shape helium-4 nucleus configuration because I can't get a free neutron out of it. So it's four baryons to one virtual particle. And that's the hand rule. I'm gonna call it a hand rule. I get, in the helium-4 nucleus, I get four baryons and one virtual baryon free. In one specific geometric spatial configuration, whereas I can't find I can't get that wireframe to work properly in any other virtual configuration. So that kind of sets up all other configurations for failure and makes this configuration, this shape, the actual shape of the helium-4 nucleus. This is how the quarks align. This is how your baryons are. This is how your atomons are aligned in the helium-4 nucleus. How do you test it experimentally? You take it and you load it up in a cyclotron. You smash it 100 times because you're going to find that there's a predictive energy level type of readout that differentiates the other baryon alignments. So this is actually a more stable structure than any of the other ones. But the cool part is you can now find virtual baryons in every other basically every other isotope configuration for all the other elements, which means you kind of have this, the charges are the same, but the amount of gluons or the concentration of gluons or some you're gonna have this number variance that says under this configuration you're going to be able to trap and store X number of additional gluons to hold that shape together, just because there's a little bit of a paramagnetic happenstance. Because what we're showing here is, even though that virtual baryon is made up of 3 other pre-existing baryons, but inferring from how electrons work, nobody gives a damn. So you're gonna get structural configurations like this in molecules. So it's gonna be if we take a whole bunch of helium-4 nuclei in this shape, we're actually going to get, if we take 2 of these together, we're getting 2 extra neutrons associated with these 2 nuclei. So if you do this again with a count of carbon or something, so let's say, carbon is 12. So you can start dividing it, but you're going to get extra gluons holding this thing together and increasing the energy of dissociation, which means you have to drive up the mass of the star required to break it apart. Which means you can start getting different nuclear crystal lattice structures in your plasmas and stuff like this. So it's actually kind of important to get confirmation on that. It kind of changes the rule or confirms the rule. What's going on with this other picture is you can't get that. You can't make that virtual neutron with this configuration. It just doesn't work out. The bond angles are wrong, so it doesn't work. So the thing is here is this might work, but you don't actually get one. It's just sort of there based on different structural configurations. The real important point is to demonstrate how geometry goes, how these molecule shapes there. The real important point is to show how geometry matter interacts to make things stronger. It's like how you get into orbital filling for your chemistry patterns. It's like, well, your carbon is tetrahedral in shape because there are, these virtual baryons inside of the carbon nucleus directing the shape. You're getting into you're getting into these brand new number countings that you can now run on simulations that are actually going to be able to make your lives more efficient or more better or easier or something like that. If you can understand it, how and why it works, and then you can program for it to be countable, or at least find a simple mathematical structure for it to be countable at higher elements, then it's valuable. So something like lead would have, just off the top of my head, lead would have something like 132 virtual particles interspersed within its baryonic lattice. So you have to account, not only do you have to account for, there's now two extra particles floating around in this stupid thing. So the nature itself, these processes are optimizing for those virtual particles into existence. They're optimizing for the lowest energy levels first and foremost in any given system, and then you build from there. So if you know how to do better baryon counts within your atomic nuclei, you get better efficiencies in your nuclear fuels. You get better efficiencies in your chemical reactions. You get better efficiencies in your fusion, your brand new fusion reactions. So that's why stuff is important, because you get jobs and you get money from it. Hooray! So that ends my talk on the world of stuff. That's the world of innovative potential. And stuff. I'm happy. I always wanted to do the stuff. Stuff was like 10 years in the make, 15 years in the make. Everyone wanted to do this since 2012, 2011. Been wanting to do this lecture since 2011. It's awesome. It's gonna be our YouTube ad. Stuff by Innovative Potential. And that's it. Just stop it right there. Okay.